All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Federal buildings might be on the chopping block right here in Indiana. The General Services Administration briefly posted a list of 440 properties for disposal. That includes 3 here in Indiana. The Major General Emmett J. Bean Center in Lawrence, which processes all military paychecks. The Minton Capehart Federal Building in Indianapolis, which houses the VA. And the IRS and Social Security. The list also includes the Lee H. Hamilton Federal Courthouse in New Albany, Indiana. Now, a GSA spokesperson says those listings are in response to President Donald Trump's Department of Government Efficiency order. The head of local federal employees union works in the Minton Capehart building. He actually says employees are supposed to return to in-person work there tomorrow as part of President Trump's return to work order. He says getting rid of the building could jeopardize access and service.
This is the place where folks can come to have questions answered at the Internal Revenue Service, where veterans can come to have questions answered about their benefits, where folks can come to deal with the Social Security Administration. I mean, all of these things are happening in this building, and if those were taken away, it would be quite damaging for folks in Indianapolis who need in-person answers and help.
Meanwhile, a spokesperson for General Services Administration tells us that properties that were on the list are not necessarily for sale. Giles says even if the government was to sell the properties, the process would take a while. Congressman André Carson is sharply criticizing those potential cuts. He talked to our government reporter, Garrett Berquist.
And with us now is Congressman André Carson. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
What have you been able to find out about the GSA's decision to list these buildings for disposal? What led to it?
I'm deeply disappointed. I sit on a transportation committee, and I used to be the ranking member of one of the subcommittees on that committee, which is economic development. And economic development oversees a lot of the real estate and buildings in our federal portfolio. A lot of it, what GSA is saying, is still deliberately unclear. DOJ's website is deceptively short in terms of details. Their numbers don't add up. It's creating a lot of fear and confusion. And these are not very thoughtful decisions. I think DOJ is making irresponsible choices that have no basis in fact, with no regard to how it impacts ordinary Americans. I think the idea that DOJ would even consider selling these federal buildings is ridiculous. Listen, DFAS provides paychecks to our service members. Paying our courageous service members is not an option. It even provides the paycheck for our president, for Donald Trump. So maybe that will make them reconsider. You know, people in and out and around our city and rely on services provided at the Capehart building. And closing that facility will mean they will no longer have options for services. We have some of the best caseworkers in the country. They work every day, our team, along with the staff of DFAS, along with Social Security, to provide wraparound services for constituents. Mr. Musk has called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, which is an entitlement, you know, and this kind of mindset is unfortunate. He couldn't be more disconnected from reality. Social Security beneficiaries work their entire lives for this money. It's theirs, and they deserve it.
What would the effect be of closing some or all of the federal buildings in Indiana that were on that disposal list?
I think it's going to be devastating. I think it's going to be disruptive. It even looks like the study for the VA will be out of the question. And it's about time that the Veterans Administration expand their footprint in Indiana, particularly in Indianapolis. And I think these kinds of decisions have to be more thoughtful. They can't be made by an algorithm. They can't be determined by AI alone. They have to be thought out. Now, I'm not against austerity, but I am against the kind of reckless agenda and decisions that are being made in the first 100 days.
The federal government employs about 2.25 million civilians, and we've got a $36 trillion national debt. Don't we need to make cuts somewhere?
Well, certainly. I'm not against austerity. I think that there are many cuts that need to be made and that should be made. I think looking at the federal government alone is not a productive way to make those cuts. President Trump is a master at symbolism. He understands the importance of symbols. For example, taking down the lettering from USAID. Not substantive, but it had great symbolic value. Shutting down the website of USAID and their X account. Not substantive, but it held great symbolic value. These kinds of proposals are not only reckless, they have symbolic value for those people who wanted to see him dismantle what we know of the American system. But it doesn't get us much. There are ways in which we can rein in our deficit without displacing critical federal employees who provide services to taxpayers.
I also want to get your reaction to the VA cuts that have just been announced. Given the ongoing problems that we've had with the VA, is that agency truly worth the expense to the taxpayer?
Well, as we've seen, President Trump and DOGE abruptly terminated the contract funding to start a new medical facility here in Indianapolis. We need this badly. The current facility is way over capacity, and it's really at the end of its building cycle. They terminated funding even for the feasibility study. And without that, we can't even start construction. And so I think these cuts have impacted even local contractors for sanitization and sterilization at the VA center. That are critical in prepping the rooms for surgeries. And without these services, all of those surgeries have been canceled effectively yesterday. And this has resulted in a mess that can only be done with not only the push from Democrats, which we've been doing, but a push from my Republican friends who have to say enough is enough.
Meanwhile, Congressman Jim Banks is defending reported plans to cut more than 80,000 jobs from the VA. That would return the VA to the 2019 staffing levels. He says the VA is not providing the services that veterans deserve and should expect.
I hear from my constituents every day. They want the VA to be less bureaucratic and more focused on the veteran. I am a veteran. That's what President Trump is focused on. That's what I'm focused on as well. The talking points of the VA cutting necessary employees who are focused on veterans is bogus. It's not provable. The fact is that DOGE, President Trump, myself, Republicans in the Senate and the Congress, we're going to make sure that this VA works better for veterans than ever before. I guarantee it. I mean, the fact is what President Trump did in his first term to provide more community care and better options to our veterans, whether it's at a VA hospital or at a private hospital, he did great. He did historic and great things to the VA for the VA in his first term. He's going to do even more and greater things for the VA in his second term.
All right, coming up, we ask a northern Indiana congressman about the tariff threat and the possibility of a government shutdown at the end of the week. All right, welcome back. President Donald Trump has delayed the implementation of tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but he has not canceled them. Meanwhile, Congress has until Friday to figure out how to prevent another government shutdown. Our government reporter Garrett Berquist talked to Congressman Rudy Yakym about both issues. Yakym serves on the House Ways and Means Committee. He also represents the South Bend area, which has a strong manufacturing sector.
Let's bring in Congressman Rudy Yakym. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me on today.
So tariffs play a major role in President Trump's speech, and that included his reciprocal tariff announcement. Northern Indiana, where you represent, is very heavily industrialized. Are you concerned that this might lead to higher prices for the raw materials that the factories in your district need?
Well, the president's been very clear that we have to stop the flow of fentanyl across our borders. Under President Biden, I traveled northern Indiana and heard loud and clear from our law enforcement officials and our community members about how fentanyl was killing so many people in my district. I've personally got friends who have died from fentanyl overdoses. We have to stop the flow of fentanyl. The president's been very clear that that's what these tariffs are for and why he's using them to secure our borders. In addition to that, of course, we maintain a very close working relationship with the manufacturers in my district, and we constantly receive feedback from them, and we communicate that feedback to the administration.
Do you support President Trump's call for no taxes on tips or overtime wages, and what impact do you see that having in your district?
Well, being a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, who has jurisdiction over the entirety of the U.S. tax code, we're actually meeting this next week to go through all of the president's requests and all the feedback we've received from the district and how we can thread the needle to get some things done. But the president has clearly said that he wants to see no tax on tips become law, and we're looking for a path to do something like that.
What can we expect from the talks that you just alluded to in the Ways and Means Committee?
Well, the president wants to do things like take the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017, which are expiring this year, and extend those permanently. A lot of people have forgotten that at the end of this year, if House Republicans and working with our colleagues in the Senate and the president, if we don't do anything, Americans are in for a $5 trillion tax increase at the end of this year. I don't believe that Americans are paying too much in taxes. I believe that we've got a spending problem here in the federal government, and we're going to use the budget reconciliation process to make spending reforms while at the same time permanently extending the president's tax cuts.
The government is currently set to run out of money on March 14th. How likely is it that the House will be able to head that off?
Well, of course, when President Trump came into office, he's still cleaning up messes that were left to him by President Biden. Unfortunately, House Democrats have not been really negotiating with the House Republicans very well over the course of the last 3 months on this upcoming deadline, which is why the president has called for a continuing resolution through September 30th. We do not want to shut the government down. Democrats have certainly been talking about shutting the government down next week on March 14th. But I think that our military deserves to be paid, and I believe that we need to keep our government open. And so you're seeing negotiations in the House right now to ensure that we do just that.
What will the continuing resolution need to include in order to get a yes vote from you?
Well, of course, we will just simply continue the government funding through September 30th from last year's appropriations bills. There's also going to be some changes that will take place in that CR to ensure that we can maintain the military as the world's premier fighting force. And so we're working through those things right now in the House and negotiating those.
Should Indiana industries be worried about escalating retaliatory tariffs from Canada and Mexico?
Well, I think, of course, the president is constantly listening to feedback from those of us on the ground who are in constant communication with the manufacturers here in Indiana. You've actually seen the administration make some adjustments because he is listening to that feedback and he's making adjustments along the way. But at the same time, we have to remember what our goal is here. And the goal is to stop the flow of fentanyl coming across our borders, as well as secure our borders.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team looks at the federal building issue, plus the latest from the Statehouse. All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Dana Black and Republican Allie Bartlett. Good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Yes, a little different format here at the desk. Good to have you. The General Services Administration briefly listed 3 federal buildings for disposal. We talked about it at the top of the show. That includes the building in Lawrence where all military paychecks are processed. Allie, we'll start with you. Does this put federal employees and government services at risk?
I don't necessarily think that it's going to put any necessary federal services at risk. The things that need to get done are going to continue to get done. This is a part of government efficiency, and it's an uncomfortable conversation. I think you guys are going to hear me say this a million times throughout this little segment, but sometimes we have to face reality. It's a tough reality, and the reality is that we have to make cuts somewhere.
Right.
Does it mean that essential services are going to be cut? Does it mean that processes that need to happen are going to go away? No, but it does mean that things could be be uncomfortable for a while, and that's the bottom line.
Dana, I'll let you respond to that as well.
So I have to kind of agree, and it's hard to do that.
I love when this happens.
So first of all, I'm a tech person, so cutting checks actually was grating to my ear. I know that there are a lot of people who are getting direct deposit at this point. However, what I am concerned about is that everything is happening all at once without actually understanding the consequences that could come down the line. There's been no analysis. I promise you, Doge and their 18-year-olds have no analysis on the long-term impact of the changes that they're making, and that's what's disturbing.
And a part of with these buildings, Social Security is housed there too. So I mean, this could affect everyday people. Speak to that a little bit more, Dana.
I mean, honestly, we have older people who are not tech savvy, who still get grandchild, daughter to take them to the office so they can have those one-on-one conversations so they can actually understand. But again, this speaks to the larger slash and burn mentality of this current administration without actually understanding how it's going to negatively impact the community writ large. And you see people all over the country that are saying, wait, hold up. You don't have to do it so drastically. We could trim in certain places,
Let
but
me
the
just
way
say,
it's
though,
being done
if we don't do things drastically, they may never happen. As we've seen with government for the last however many years, if we don't take a drastic approach, I think any approach at this point is going to be called drastic.
I disagree with that.
Because we've done nothing for the last however many decades, and that's why we're trillions of dollars in debt.
But Allie, you can see the point where some people this seems like a hot knife through butter.
Of course it does, but I think any change that's going to have any sort of impact on our federal debt is going to be drastic and scary because we haven't done it in all these years, and that's why we're trillions of dollars in debt.
Usually for a change of this magnitude, you have a strategic plan, and we can all see what the plan is, so we can see where we are, the path that we're taking, and where we're going to end up. Those two second parts to that plan are missing.
But usually a plan of this magnitude doesn't have any results. There's no results because that's why it hasn't happened.
Allie, this is not a plan. This is slash and burn.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. Another thing that we're watching, property taxes. We talked about it the last time you both were in here. The governor and the House continue to go back and forth on this one. Where do we end up? Dana, we'll start with you here right now.
Well, I think this is a really interesting topic because you have the governor who wants to slash at a much higher level with not much regard to how local municipalities will have to deal with that and school districts. Then you have the school districts and mayors on both sides of the aisle that are pushing back and saying, wait a second, this is going to cause us to not provide the necessary services. I think Braun is on Team Doge, and he's wanting to also slash and burn in a way that he doesn't necessarily understand the impact. Remember earlier we talked earlier this year, and he was saying, these municipalities need to learn to do more with less. Right. But you don't understand what that looks like. We have no idea what that means. We don't know what critical services that are going to be cut because of that funding. So that funding cut. So again, the compromise, which that's what government is about, right? Yep. The compromise that we saw come out of the Senate, I think was a happy medium between the two of making sure municipalities are in good shape and we're cutting property taxes.
To that point, Allie, we have heard some rumors and speculation that Todd Houston and the governor have come up with some type of plan behind closed doors. Should they release that? And also, are you on the same page as Dana when it comes to the municipality perspective?
Look, I think one thing was made clear during election time, which is that Hoosiers want to see more dollars back in their pockets as a result of property tax cuts. That was made abundantly clear, and it's something that Governor Braun has said from the very beginning he is going to pursue on behalf of Hoosiers, and that's what he's doing. Now, I will say, I think you are correct that compromise is always going to be an element of this, and I think we are going to see a compromise between the Senate version, the House version, and the version that Governor Braun would like to see. At the end of the day, the goal by all three of them, all three of those leaders, is to put more dollars back in Hoosier pockets. And like I said, I'm going to say it again, that's going to cause some discomfort. It's probably going to cause some discomfort at the local level. It's probably going to cause some discomfort elsewhere because there are going to have to be cuts. What I will say is that I hope, and I think between the House and the Senate, we could get there. I've said this a million times on this show, we have to consider revenue generating options in the state of Indiana. I think you agree with me on that. Or iGaming. I think there's a lot of things that could happen. There was an iGaming bill that was proposed in the legislature earlier this year. It's still out there. That's $300 million in the pockets of Hoosiers. That is not a tax. And so we have to consider revenue generating options. I hope that conversation comes back around.
Also, if they want to put some more money,
30 seconds,
if they want to put more money back in the pocket, let's look at the gas tax. Republicans won't touch that. So let's put some more money back back in the pockets. People have vehicles. And again, discomfort for you and I may be detrimental to someone else. And I think that to say that there's going to be some discomfort to an elderly family who's struggling with making sure that they have all the services that they have in their community is different than those of us who are upwardly mobile.
Good to see you both. Thank you very much for being here. As always, good to see you both. I know we were just getting started. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30, and be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.